Coming up on UGTV, Standing Committee Meetings of the Unified Government of Wyandotte County, Kansas City, Kansas. A meeting of the Neighborhood and Community Development Standing Committee. This will be followed by a meeting of the Economic Development and Finance Standing Committee.
Past 5 o'clock. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Roll call: Walters. Murguia.
Here.
Townsend.
Here.
McKiernan.
Here.
Walker.
Here. Welcome to the Standing Committee meeting of the Neighborhood and Community Development Committee. Everyone is welcome. We have no one in attendance. It would appear that, oh, we do, in the back. So
making sure we can be heard.
we want to be able to be heard. If anyone has anything they want to address concerning any item on the standing committee agenda, please come to the microphone and state your name, your address, and you'll be allocated 3 minutes to speak. First item on the agenda, measurable goals, urban planning and land use. The presentation and discussion of 2016 goals for urban planning and land use submitted by Rob Richardson, Urban Planning. Oh, I'm sorry. First of all, I think we'll approve the minutes from the Standing Committee meeting of December 7th, 2015.
Move to approve as submitted.
Second.
Okay, please call the roll.
Assent.
Oh, I always like to make them individually, but okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? It passes.
Mr. I would ask if we could hold on the measurable goals, maybe do the committee agenda number 1 first, and then we're still setting.
All right, we'll do item number 1. Mr. Slaughter?
Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Okay, we have some transfers to take care of first, and then we'll have a couple presentations for you.
All right.
First, we have 2 transfers from the land bank. They're going to CHWC 1124, 1126 Armstrong Avenue. They're going to construct a duplex there.
Move to approve as submitted.
Second.
Would the clerk please call the roll?
Roll call, Mergia,
Aye.
Townsend,
Aye.
McKiernan,
Aye.
Walker.
Aye.
And next, we have the next batch of delinquent Unified Government City of Kansas City, Kansas properties that will be transferred to the land bank, and we will have those taxes abated.
Move to approve as submitted.
Second.
Please call the roll.
Roll call, Mergia,
Aye.
Townsend,
Aye.
McKiernan,
Aye.
Walker.
Aye. Item number 2.
Next, we are going to present the 2015 achievements and our annual conveyance report. And per the statute, we have to report each year the past year's activity. And we thought we'd add some highlights of some of the achievements we've want to brag about. So some of the really highlights we want to talk about is, of course, we launched our partnership with Opportunity Space back in September. We established the public real estate portal. We've had some good feedback on that, a lot of positive notes, easy to navigate, easy to read, much easier to look at than an Excel spreadsheet. So we were happy with that. We also created a customer service kiosk. It's located in the lobby area of the Economic Development Office. And that gives people from, the public to come in and also view the property on Opportunity Space. If they want to register, they have an opportunity to actually apply for a land bank property right at that kiosk. Of course, we just talked about the abatement of the UG-owned property, so we'll continue doing that. We feel that that's a positive. And then back earlier in the year, if you remember, we did the side lot letter campaign. We sent out about 400 letters. We received about 100 to 120 back. We ended up approving close to 90, and we felt that that was a good thing, and we will probably consider doing that again. Some general numbers. We conveyed 172 properties this past year. 164 of those go into the tax rolls. 8 of those going to our nonprofit partners. We brought in a total of $117,760, and we decreased our inventory from 2243 to 2192 over the year.
Chris? I just want to verify, that 117,000 was just from the conveyances. That doesn't represent taxes paid or will be paid, correct?
Correct. That is the amount of
Just the
revenue
money
we
for
took
moving
in
them.
from selling property out of the
Perfect.
land bank. Just a couple more stats. We received a total of 173 applications. As you can see, again, we had about a 75% award rate on that, with about 57 of those rejected. Now, this kind of, Commissioner McKiernan, is along your line. 2009, we're able, through our technology department, to generate a report that says of all the property we've sold, and we know a majority of those are just side lots.
Right.
We've generated almost $167,000 in tax revenue. So, again, it's just another thing that we're proud of. Slowly chipping along. One day we hope to have that as maybe a 7-figure number, but we're not there yet.
What would be the most common reason for rejecting an application?
Maybe the property wasn't in the land bank, maybe they owe taxes. Some of the intended uses, just, I want a property because I want to put some playground equipment for children to play on, and we
Okay.
told them, no, you're not going to do that.
So maybe you answered this already. I'm sorry. Apologize to everyone on TV that has to view me eating also. It's been a long day. So I just had a question. You might have answered this, but the total property tax revenue produced from 09 to present.
Yes.
Yeah.
Remember, a lot of these are small lots, and the other thing that I found out when we first generated this report last year is if the properties were combined, it really doesn't reflect in this figure. So this is really still freestanding parcels that are just not in the land bank's name anymore. They're in private hands, and this is the amount of tax revenue we've generated. So
And what happens to that money?
it goes to pay for services. This is
Does it just go back into the general fund?
General fund.
the money we bring in, yes, goes to the general fund. And we hope to soon have a conversation about capturing some of that money to help us.
Yeah, so I would just tell you, I would completely support all of that money staying in a land bank fund to, if for no other reason than to hold more tax sales, to process more tax delinquent property. And I think from our conversations with Commissioner McKiernan, Commissioner Markley, and our administrator Doug Bach, it's about $40,000 to contract with an abstractor to do I forget the percentage, but a larger percentage of tax sale properties to process them. I'd like to see that money go there. But
That's a great
you may have
idea.
other ideas, but that's where I would like to see it.
And I would-
Commissioner Margia and Commissioner McKiernan, I just wanted to let you know that part of the process that we're going through with staff, looking at how we can kind of fight some of these issues, we're having a very holistic approach that we've started. One of the issues or areas that we're looking at is exactly that, the number of backlog properties that are up for tax sale, and then looking at our strategic areas and saying what can we do that would be most impactful, and then possibly looking at those outside services to help speed the process up in targeted ways so that we're doing it strategically. So that's kind of where we're at right now, but we'll be bringing that back to you. Chris is in on that. Tip Laughlin's on that. Marlon's going to be in on that. Pretty much a lot of our staff is in on these conversations right now, and we're looking at that kind of whole picture. Joe and Gordon and I are working with everyone on that. So yes, exactly what you're talking about, that kind of thing.
So do you know, just because we're talking about it, so I used to have, and I think I still do at home, the total number of properties in the tax, or in the land bank. Do you know that number? In general, I mean, you deal with it.
It's
so-
been hovering above or below about 2,200. As of the end of the year, we were just a little bit under 2,200.
And so from year to year, does that go up, down, or stay the same?
Generally, it's gone up. This is really the first year that we've actually decreased the properties. Something I'm pretty proud of, considering that we've added about 100 of UG properties that were delinquent into the, so,
Yeah.
you could really maybe say we've decreased it about 150 some properties this past year.
But
And-
realistically, if we went out and we acquired all the vacant land that is tax sale eligible, we could double that, couldn't we?
Oh, easily.
Yeah,
easily.
So
Yeah,
that
it's
to
like
me is,
4,500.
it plays with your question. Yeah, we hold 22, but we could, if we went and got the tax sale eligible, that is at least 3 years delinquent, vacant lots, we could control those and double that number.
It would be closer to 7,000, I think, right? There's about 4,500 tax delinquent.
That's what I was just, my next question. So, Melissa, so the total number of tax sale eligible properties right now, do we know that number? Do you think
I
it's
think
40?
Tib had it. He's sitting back there, but maybe Chris knows
I
it.
would say 4,000, 4,500 is probably a very strong
And
estimate.
are those vacant properties not improved? Or is that-
That's probably a number
No,
is a
it's-
combination of both.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right. So that
Probably
includes
more
properties
improved.
with structures?
Yeah.
Correct.
Okay.
Okay, but that's okay. So
Yeah.
4,500, approximately 4,500 tax sale eligible properties. And over the years, Chris, has that gone up or down?
Tip's coming forward now.
I knew I'd get him to come out of his seat.
He's here for a
Mr.
reason.
Laughlin probably have a more knowledgeable answer for that one.
Okay.
Right now, we're sitting at about 4,500 tax sale eligible properties. That goes up by roughly 20% while we move out somewhere around 10 to 15% through the redemption and tax sale process. So our net increases every year.
Okay, wait. That's too fast for me.
Sorry.
Okay, so currently we have about 4,500 pieces of property that are tax sale eligible.
Correct.
Okay, that means they are not paying their taxes for people that don't understand what that means.
Yes, they're at least 3 years delinquent.
At least 3 years, they have not paid their property tax. Then from year to date, in the past, I'm looking at historical data, has that number of 4,500 tax sale eligible properties, has it risen to 4,500 or has it been up and down?
It's going up. It goes up every
It
year.
goes up every year. So it goes up every year. Go
But
ahead, I need to think about
The degree
that.
of the incline or the amount of going up, I don't want to make it sound like it's sharply rising each year. It just may be a steady increase of maybe 4 or 5% a year, but it's not, we haven't gone from 1,000 to 4,500 in 2 years.
Right, but I think the important thing for people that don't work for government for a living is that people, especially people that are concerned about how much property tax that they pay, that it's important that they understand every time somebody doesn't pay their property taxes, that's a loss of revenue to the government. And we have bills to pay just like everybody else does. And so we have to figure out how to get that money somewhere else, or people that are paying end up paying more.
Yeah, and Commissioner, that's exactly the issue that we see, that we're trying to come to some sort of targeted solve for over the years. But the idea is to look at this more strategically and not just go after all of them at one time. So, but coming back to the plan that you would buy off on as a commission, on how we could move forward to try to get that backlog down instead of let it continue to creep up on us, because we're not abstracting those properties as fast as they're coming in.
Right, so is there a formula, some sort of statistical or mathematical formula that can demonstrate to us how much in dollars our government is losing every year in our tax base?
Yes.
Do we know that?
Yeah, I don't think we have that number right now, but it's relatively easy to generate. We know how much each of those properties is not paying. There may not be, there's a report certainly a report we can run. If there's not a column on the spreadsheet for it now, there could be.
So I would like to know that, because I would like to show, even if it's just in my district, I'd like to post that publicly so people can see how much money we are not collecting
But
every year in property
To
taxes.
some extent, that'll be a theoretical number, because the best number we have on the property taxes owed are from back before some of these houses sat empty for quite some time.
Okay, but
So-
I'm still looking
But
at,
we
what
can- we
we're
can come
still
up with a
seeing
number
an
for you,
an
Commissioner.
increase, which means
Yes.
that every year, more and more people, is this an accurate statement? Every year, more and more people in Wyandotte County do not pay their taxes.
Well, that would be more number of properties. So whether the numerical revenue value is, it's not necessarily equivalent, but we've gone after certain types of parcels, some of the ones that had larger back taxes owed. So the ones that maybe are still sitting out there, and again, Tib and I are just starting to dig into this as he's transitioned over delinquent tax for us here starting the beginning of the year. Those ones in theory that had the larger amounts owed, we've gone after over the last few years quite strongly. Now it's coming down to maybe ones that aren't as large of an amount of revenue, but the number of parcels is what we're referring to.
Yeah, so
That
I
makes
get what
sense.
you're saying, thinking it through. So the dollar amount might be different than the number of parcels. So I get that. Can you provide, when you dig deeper into this, can you provide both of those pieces of information?
Absolutely.
And can you divide it by residential and commercial?
Yeah, and that was the other component I was going to mention. You've got your rate differences on tax between residential and commercial, so we can show that kind of too
Yeah,
as well.
it's just, as an elected leader, this is so frustrating. It seems so elementary to all of us that are up here all the time, but it's so frustrating when people line up and ask for more money for stuff, and they just don't understand. And if you say no, it's because you don't care about, I don't know, starving homeless children. I mean, it's all I can think of. Of course, we all care about those things, but when you generated $50,000, just to make up a number, 5 years ago, and now today you're only generating $5,000. I mean, how can you increase spending for these service programs? And I just don't think it's said enough. And until we figure out, and the one thing I remember from our former county administrator more than anything that he ever said is that, to solve all of our problems is to grow our tax base. That means more businesses and more residents. And unfortunately, we're going the other direction, or it appears that we are. So I'd like to see parcels as well as dollar amount. And I think that needs to be out there all the time, out there for people to see all the time.
Can I get a word in there, Treasurer?
You may.
I want that number too, but the number that interests me, in addition to that number, we each year add new housing, new commercial, new buildings and so forth, which you would expect would have a significant impact on the county's assessed value. Is there a way to show, tax dollars are one thing, but the assessed value of these parcels that we lose, I'm concerned about why, when we have a good year, and the last number I have is dated, but we went from roughly $1 billion to $1 billion and 4/10, or a very small increase, although we had added significant development out west, which suggests to me that we're losing assessed value, probably predominantly in the eastern part of the community, but it could be further east or further west than I'm thinking. I'd like to see, we know how many new buildings went up, new homes went up, and what the assessed value of existing property was and is. Why is it not increasing more with all that we have added through the various economic development incentives we had? That number, regardless of what taxes they pay, that number is the number we use to determine the mill levy. That's what the mill levy is applied against in order to generate our budget. And I'm not seeing this increase in the county's, or the city part of the county, total assessed value that you would expect with what we've done. So to make it long, I'd like that number in addition to the number Commissioner McGee described.
And Commissioner
And I think that that's a very important add-on to just the number, the value of the back taxes, to know the assessed value, because what we need is, we need a bigger tax base that pays taxes. And I've started adding that second piece to everybody I talk to, a larger tax base of properties that pay tax, whether that be properties, and some properties don't pay tax because people just don't pay them. Some properties don't pay tax because we use a property tax abatement as an incentive to increase our assessed value, but that property may still not generate taxes for a few years. And I totally agree with Commissioner Walker's point about the total assessed value, and to be able to look at that regionally would be real interesting. I took over the weekend and I looked at one square block in my district, and I totaled the assessed value for 2012, 13, 14, and 15, and I found that of all the houses, all of which but one were tax current. Even the one that caused this huge drop in assessed value was tax current, but because it had been abandoned for 4 years. So bottom line is, out of all these properties, a net loss of value of $44,000, representing about $9,000 of property tax that we will never collect because we won't bill, because the value has dropped. And I think this just puts an exclamation mark on our need to get out there and stabilize and stop properties from sliding off into either demolition. And by the way, the value of this house, this block, will go down further after we tear down the house that burned on this block that caused me to do this assessment. 4 years vacant, 4 years nobody pays the taxes. How do we let it go 4 years? And I know that's what we're all working on. we can no longer tolerate that sort of delinquency in maintenance or in paying taxes, because now that block is creating a figurative black hole, and it's going to start pulling in the blocks around it, and we're going to start losing assessed value, even if those rest of the houses stay occupied and tax current. So I think the value of the assessment, in addition to the value of the property taxes, paid and not paid, would be excellent numbers to build some strategies on.
Commissioner McKiernan, we're actually kind of working towards what I would call like a heat map for this, so where we could see, we've seen other communities that have done this so that they can, you can overlay a myriad of different things, but then you can see if your values are going up or going down in the neighborhood over an assessment period or several years of assessment period. But then also look at things like, code violations, crime, and all those other statistics. So we're working towards that. We've got kind of the first iteration of it demoed to us last Friday or Thursday by DOTS and GIS. So we're getting closer to be able to kind of start sharing that. But then what that we're going to need to work with you on is how we're going to start tackling those in different ways, and what the prescriptions are may vary from neighborhood to neighborhood.
I love it.
Mr. McGee.
I'm raising my hand. So there's an old map that I carried around for a long time with me. I'm gonna start carrying it around again. It's a white map with red dots on it and shows everything that's 3 or more years property tax delinquent. Okay? And I mean, if everybody else wants to see it, that's great. But I'd like to see that map compared, and if you need help finding it, I can send it to you, because I still have it on my computer. I'd like you to take that map from several years ago, and then if you could map the same data today. For selfish reasons, I'd like to see, because I think there's been a massive improvement in my district. My district was never terrible about tax delinquencies. It's always been a place of choice to live, though lower income. But I'd be interested to know, with the development and the infill housing and stuff that we've done, where the property tax delinquency is now. And this map is a very big picture. It's like an at-a-glance map. If we could maybe zoom in on it and get more specific data and do comparables, that would be great.
How long ago did you have that map done?
I didn't have it done, so it preceded me. So it's been over a
Chris
decade.
Cooley did it about 2.5 to 3 years ago. He did one countywide, and then he broke it out. Several of us asked for our districts, and basically it's the tax sale eligible overlay from UG Maps, but just printed in a format that we could, on an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper, that we could take. He also printed some 3 foot by 4 foot posters that we could put on the wall if we wanted to.
No, I know what you're talking about. Oh, first.
It's the same map.
It is?
Yeah, it's the
Okay.
same thing.
All right, well then, I'll send you mine anyway, so you know what one I'm talking about. Because I thought it was way older
With a
than
point of reference, we can get a comparison to the
Yeah.
current.
You might be able to find it. I don't know who made it. It probably was maybe
But
Chris.
if we see yours specifically, we have something to work from.
I think I have a bunch on file, so.
Because it came to this committee about 3 years ago.
We have
Anything
that
else on
data.
this item?
It's there.
Okay, let's move on. I believe we're at item 3, land bank donation request criteria.
And this was after our conversation last month about what is the process when we consider these donations, so I thought I'd put a short presentation together. Some of the issues that you guys have raised, what's the criteria? Per the policy, we do have the ability to accept donations from private entities as a source of acquiring property. Generally, there's an application that we have filled out, lists the information of the requester, information about the property. We then request through our real estate abstractors to generate an ownership and encumbrance report. We want to see, does this property still maybe have a mortgage tied to it, any kind of liens, anything that's maybe probate, family-related issues, that if we took it, are we going to have a hard time selling it or transferring it after the fact? And if generally there's no issues, I mean, that's pretty much what I've used to bring it before you guys for consideration. We've had 28 properties approved since 2011. Generally, again, tax delinquency's been the number one reason for the donation request. Sometimes it is a family matter. Hey, I just realized I got this property from my grandmother who's died and I didn't even realize it. Maybe now they're getting tax sale notices and stuff. Or if it's been in some of our targeted areas and we know, hey, this is a quick way that we can get the property. So instead of coming back to you and saying if we do A, B, and C, and that equals D, okay, we accept it. Here's just some concerns that I think we need to consider before we get to that point, because there's a lot of considerations that we may say yes, and the same considerations we want to say no to. And I just, threw some down, is it in a hold area? Is it in a target area versus what do we do with the property that's not in those areas? Is it a house versus a vacant lot? Or is the land bank, is the government initiated, or is someone coming to us and saying, hey, please take my property? Is it a brownfield area? Is it an area that's maybe not as contaminated or been in some of our old industrial areas? What are the taxes issues? Is it easier to take this as a donation versus going through the lengthy process of a foreclosure and adding another property for the abstractors to work who are already, inundated with property? Is this something that we have the ability to take, rehab, and move, or move to our partners to rehab, or is this something that we're going to have to hold in demo? And is there a way that maybe we look in the future to say, if you want us to take your property, and we know there's certain things, you're going to have some maybe a small cash donation along with that. So just some points I wanted to bring up to spark a conversation, whether we have time for that tonight or not. But the main point I wanted to bring out is, from my perspective, I'm trying to give you as much information as I can, but just because we say if it's in a hold area and it's got an improvement and we think we can rehab it, it may not be the best fit for the land bank. And that's where I always figured that this setting would have those conversations to make that decision. So.
Mr. McKiernan?
Let's take vacant lots first. So properties without improvements. I think it's a little bit more straightforward. I think one of the concerns that we've had is that people are going to come and dump a vacant lot on us that they owe a bunch of back taxes on, and dumping it on us is a way to get out of paying the taxes that have accrued that they haven't been paying on that property. So first thing would be, if we were more systematic or aggressive, call it whatever you want, in billing for and collecting those back taxes, that problem should start to go away just a little bit. We shouldn't have properties with a bunch of back taxes coming here. But if we take it out to its logical conclusion, most of the folks who aren't paying their taxes, I would guess, are inclined to simply walk away from that property, abandon it, and we're going to get it anyway. So at least on the vacant lot side, my first inclination would be to say, they want to donate that lot, then we take it and we cut our losses up front because now we control it and it doesn't stay vacant for another 2 years out of our control. But I would also suggest that maybe we think about something along the lines of, once you've done that once, you're done. You get a mulligan on your first one and then you can't do that again, which would imply that you've either acquired more properties in the interim or you've let additional properties go in the interim. And so that would be my suggestion, is you get a one-time deal on the vacant property. So just throw that out for discussion's sake. The improved lots have so many more details, but at least on vacants, I'll just throw that out as a starter.
Well, thank you. I think,
No, I'm teasing. Go ahead, Commissioner Chung. I'm just giving him a hard time.
what I want to say refers to, as Commissioner McKiernan's already mentioned, the vacant lots. And in those situations where we've had individuals come before us, just in the last couple of years since I've been here, it was helpful to know, to have those persons who seek to return these pieces of property to the land bank to come before us and tell us exactly why. I don't recall that any of the ones that have come, and there have only been a couple, I think, no more than 3, in that situation had delinquent taxes. But there was some other problem with it. And I wouldn't want anybody to think that you're automatically, if you come to us, gonna get a 1. It should be dependent upon the circumstances. I don't know if you meant
Okay.
to suggest that, but someone may listen and think, okay, well, I'm already gonna I've got 1 shot, I haven't had my 1. I don't know if you contemplated it to be that kind of situation. Because a lot of these, other than these considerations, I think will depend on what the circumstances are.
Commissioner Murguia.
Thank you. So I'm just curious, and we don't need to belabor this tonight, but since we do have a little extra time, I'm just curious from Commissioner McKiernan and Commissioner Townsend's perspective, why would we just allow a person one opportunity to do this? Why would we also not accept houses? I mean, what's the thinking behind limiting the number of pieces of ground or structures that someone could turn over?
I have no problem with we'll take all the ones that are gonna be abandoned anyway, so that we control them and we can be more proactive. One of the things that always comes up is, well, yeah, but then we gotta pay to cut the lots. I would argue we're paying to cut those lots anyway, because the people who aren't paying the taxes on those vacant lots probably aren't cutting the grass. We're probably abating it, and I would guess putting a lien somewhere that doesn't get paid along with the taxes not getting paid. So I have no problem. What I don't want someone to do, though, is come and donate one, then go out and get another one, and then let it go. So I don't want this to be like a revolving door, but where they go out and get more and then give those to us, and I don't know, that's my first thought. But no, I have no problem, because we ultimately end up having to deal with the vacant lots and the vacant properties, the vacant structures anyway. So we might as well own them and control them if we're going to have to deal with them. That's kind of where I'm thinking right now. But then, I'll go back to something you said earlier. Then I think we do need to take some of the revenue that we're making off of the sale of some of these properties out of the land bank and pull it back, because especially if we start taking structures, now we've got a more complicated and more costly overhead that goes along with managing, maintaining, minimizing our risk and our liability in those structures, and also a little bit maybe more in the way of marketing, possibly in the way of rehab. So if we were to start routinely taking structures, which so far we're only taking a couple as a test, then I would absolutely agree that we need to pull back some of that revenue and use it to better fund land bank for the purpose of managing that portfolio that we could get.
So, since everybody's giving their 2 cents, I think we should take everything, structure, vacant lot that people want to give us that are tax delinquent. I don't think we should save people, like if somebody's only 2 years tax delinquent and it hasn't harmed their credit at all or their ability to buy things at all, then no, I'm not into bailing somebody out. But if somebody is 3 years tax delinquent and they're already in trouble and already not paying their taxes, I think we should take every structure, every piece of ground, every anything, because no matter whether we like it or not, we're going to deal with it. And it makes it more cumbersome to deal with when it's not in our name. So for example, if a structure is abandoned, it's boarded up, and it gets graffitied, even though it's abandoned and boarded up, our people got to go get permission to remove that graffiti from someone, or they can't do it, or they at least have to show the effort to have reached someone to abate that graffiti. It's just ridiculous. So just from the development I've seen and done, if you really want to redevelop an area, you've got to own the property, you got to control it, and you got to, now I will add this piece of it. If we do that, we need to move some money around and put a huge amount of money in demolition, bigger than we already have, in demolition and mowing expenses. Because, I think we need to lead by example as the unified government, not allow properties to get looking terribly or overgrown or buildings falling down.
And I'm going to pile on with that one, and nobody that we ever write up for a code violation, like for not cutting their grass, nobody should ever be able to say, I'll cut mine if you cut yours.
Yeah.
We should always be setting the bar for proper upkeep of properties, both vacant and improved, my opinion.
Are you looking for an outcome here tonight?
Nope,
I don't
just
think you're gonna get one.
getting the conversation started.
Actually, I think he did take everything.
Well, I think that certainly I agree that all the vacant property, and I don't know what, I don't want someone who is taking property for development and then lets it come back. But if you own multiple properties and one gets taken for taxes and another one shows up, I mean, we should be able to grab in my opinion, any property that becomes vacant.
And as I believe with delinquent real estate department, as they probably increase their ability to add numbers to tax sales, the need for demolition, the need for donation is probably not going to be as high as it can be. Because we can just say, we don't have a spot for you now, but we can get you in an upcoming tax sale, and then we'll probably get it anyway. This should be a tool when we strategically really need to get a hold of a property, and this is the quickest way, as long as some of those other pitfalls are in there, so.
Yes.
So the only thing I'd argue about that is Brian's story. It doesn't seem like anybody heard that. It's that, you got a boarded up house, even if it's boarded up correctly, if it's next door to your house, it's hurting your property values.
Correct.
I mean, it's hurting the good people that are mowing their grass and painting their house and doing what they're supposed to be doing. So you may not want to take responsibility for it, but part of taking responsibility for it is protecting the good tax-paying, law-abiding citizen that is painting their house and mowing their grass. So it's not just about whether to take property or not. It's about doing what's best for everybody on the block. I mean, when we talk about these vacant lots or these abandoned buildings, you make it seem like they're out in a cornfield somewhere. I mean, not you personally. I'm not picking on you. But people talk about it like, yeah, that blighted abandoned building way over there. It's just because they don't live there. But there are good people that live in these neighborhoods that are forced to live next to burned up houses, just like what Brian is talking about. So that's why I think I disagree a little bit, Chris. I don't think it needs to be strategic. If there's a dumpy piece of property out there and it's tax delinquent, we need to own it, we need to clear it, we need to mow it, and we need to get it cleaned up for the sake of the other people that live around it.
And I agree, and maybe I should have expanded on what I said, is there are going to be some situations where accepting it as a donation, even though it would be quicker, is probably not the best course of action where the tax sale, the judicial foreclosure process would be. That's what I meant by that,
So why do you say that? Why is it a
Well,
better process?
maybe there are some complicated liens that would be best to go through. Maybe the house has recently been demoed and they haven't cleared off the mortgage.
Okay.
I don't want to have to be taking the money that you possibly are going to be granting me and then saying, I got a mortgage payment on a vacant lot. I don't want to have to be coming back to you
Yeah.
guys to do that.
No,
So,
that's good. I really didn't understand why we wouldn't, but now that makes sense to me. That'd be a reason to not take a piece of property.
delinquent real estate, I mean, I used to get over 300 properties a tax sale. So, and I'm not speaking for them. They do a great job with what they have now. Maybe we get back to that point, but, we'll just have to identify each property as it comes in and then come
Okay.
with the best course of action, which I think hopefully this discussion will help me to come back to you with those suggestions.
Yeah.
But I'm going to cast a hopeful vision.
So you guys are outnumbered tonight, Commissioner Townsend and Commissioner Walker. Go ahead, Brian.
But I'm going to cast a hopeful vision. And the hopeful vision is this, that we intervene on those code violations before it gets to the need that it needs to be torn down, that we intervene on the delinquent taxes before it gets to the point where we have to put it in that sale, that we develop our strategies and our processes for intervening on tax payments, on code violations, so that we arrest the progress and stabilize things before They're 4 years tax delinquent, abandoned for 4 years, burned down, and now we're going to have to pay to demo it. The demo cost for this house that burned down a week and a half ago could have paid for a whole bunch of proactive abatement, could have paid for boarding the house, plus 12 other houses. So I think we're paying too much money on the backside because we're not being proactive enough in spending what resources we have to save down the road.
Yeah.
So,
Okay. I have one more presentation, or just because of time, I could bring that back next month, because I know we still have goals that you guys have to do, so I'll let
How
you
long
guys
is the
decide.
presentation?
It could be very short.
If Commissioner Murgia and Commissioner McKiernan would stop talking, I think is what he's saying.
yeah, that pretty well.
It's just an update on opportunity space that we kind of touched on.
Let's proceed.
Just wanted to point out here some of the past ways that we marketed our property through the website, direct mailing. A lot of it's been word of mouth, neighborhood leaders. From the land bank page on wicokck.org for the year 2015, this was some stats generated through Irene Mansfield. 407 site views. Again, we generated about 187 apps, 85 sales. We launched September 22nd with the opportunity space in the public real estate portal. These are some of the page views on their site. It's almost 6,600 page views. We've had almost 240 inquiries, which has generated about 20 applications that we brought before you. So the views have picked up. I will say they're views all over the world. I noticed one was from New Zealand, which I thought was interesting, considering we may not want them to be an out-of-country owner. So going forward, what they've approached back to me is we'll keep providing the website, host the properties on there, continue to have the mapping function of it. They want to move to a more marketing plan. They want to either have it be a one-time subscription or annual subscription, or there would be a cost per property sold. So we're kind of analyzing that right now. We'll probably come back to you sometime this year with our thoughts and recommendations on that. But I believe that was the last slide. So that was that. It's working good. Again, anything better than a PDF of an Excel spreadsheet has got to be better than what we were doing. So.
All right. Any questions? Mr. McKiernan?
He didn't even want to look to his left here. He knew my hand would be up. In my opinion, again, we go back to investing versus cleaning up. I think paying a fee, whether it is a subscription or a per transfer fee, could potentially be a money saver if it allows us to move properties more quickly and more efficiently. If we move more, we make more money, not only from this transfer, but from the ultimate improvement and the taxes paid on that property. I think if we did a simple what if, we could calculate that paying a small fee up front could generate profit on the backside. And I think even though we always get stopped by, we've got to pay for it, we've got to look at the long game here and see clear to the end. I'd love to see some sort of estimate of if we had to pay this much per year, per fee, transaction, whatever, and if we move this many properties, how would that play out in terms of payment versus revenue from conveyance versus revenue from taxes after 3 years? And I'm guessing it would show a profit, even with an upfront cost. But if we could speculate and put something like that, a what if like
I'll
that
put something together and
that'd
see
be
what we
great.
come up with.
Thank you.
That's all I have. Thank you.
Okay, we'll go back to item number 1, measurable goals.
Rob was very gracious and is helping me by coming back after there was a miscommunication about tonight's agenda. So just glad to have him. Thank you.
So I'll just update you on the goals that we had for 2015. The first goal that we had was small business and development related. helping them succeed in the development process. And as you're reading the goals up there, I'll just say that one of the biggest inhibitors that we had to this issue is just a simple lack of staffing. The ability to return phone calls and return emails in a timely fashion is a significant issue for us, given the fact that on the planning side, basically Byron and Jamie handle almost all of those calls and inquiries. But we did attempt to do a SharePoint file that we would use within the department to help track small business inquiries. We actually found quite a few difficulties with that and just defining what a small business was or wasn't, because I think we all have if I asked everybody in the room, we'd have a different idea. And so we've changed strategy on that, and we're going to work with IT and use the customer relations software that 311 uses, so that we will put all of our inquiries into that, and then we'll be able to sort them and analyze them from that point of view. That way, if somebody has a different idea of what a small business might be or something like that, we'll be able to make those inquiries. So we did do some additional staff time on that, and additionally, my comments to my staff about make sure that the small guys are getting as much attention as a big corporation would, and I think that they've made progress in that area. One of the biggest gaps for small businesses is just knowing what the process is or having the time to follow through. I'm working with Casey Bowl at 82nd State right now on an issue with their sign, and they came in, it's been quite a while ago because the staff member they spoke to is 2 or 3 staff members removed at this point. And they got an answer that they didn't like, and they were discouraged, but they didn't pursue it. And so 5 years later, they've come back and have sat down and met with me, and we've gone through the process and what they can do to, what their different alternatives are to achieve their end goal. And so they're moving forward with an application now to do that either this month or next. So I think one of the issues is simply coming into City Hall, having time to pursue the process, understand what's going on, and we're going to do some electronic things in the near future, I think, that will help that. The 6-month report to strategy to the county administration was that the system that we tried with SharePoint really didn't work. It wasn't effective, and we needed a different way to do that, because I would say, why didn't you put this in there? Well, I didn't think that was a small business or those kind of issues. So we'll be moving to a system where we put all of our inquiries in, and the nice thing about that is that the technology department has said that they can develop a system that will also take those comments and inquiries and put them into our geographic information system, so that I can, when somebody pulls up a parcel either in Maui or on the GIS, they will see that somebody's had an inquiry there, and that will help me to and the staff members to be consistent in how we work with the public on different issues. It has been a struggle, and largely it's just been a matter of staffing and being able to devote enough time to it, especially with vacations. You know, we had a staff member had new babies, and he was out the last 3 weeks, and it was, you know, I have already had today 4 phone calls about people not returning phone calls and emails in the last 2 weeks, and I know exactly why, because the list is long. And so we need to work on the staffing issue in the department on the planning side, and I think that will help. And then working on with IT to develop our own version of 311 that allows us to input the critical data on all of our inquiries, and that way when they take the voicemail and they put it in, or they talk to someone on the phone and they put that in the system, then I'll be able to track how fast they're returning their phone calls and emails and taking care of things like that. I think that accountability factor will help significantly. Any questions or comments on this side?
So Rob, it's your lucky day. Your presentation happens to be at a time where I've done an enormous amount of work in regard to our budget and our departments. And I just gotta, I don't know if my other fellow commissioners know this or not, but your department is one of the worst funded departments within the unified government. It is absolutely shocking. And so from my perspective, and maybe I don't have this right, but I'm gonna continue to make a big deal about this. Your budget is approximately $800,000 a year. So to put that in perspective for everybody, we expect every multi-million-dollar deal that we do, NASCAR, every deal that's ever been done out west, for this department to review the material that they use on whatever building that they build, the Cerner development, whatever the issue is. We expect them to do multi-million-dollar deals. Then we expect them to educate some of the least educated people on planning and zoning laws and ordinances who have had no experience or education in that arena, which takes an enormous amount of time, just to handhold people to get them through a process. And they're dealing from things from everything from, I want 3 dogs, to however many millions of dollars the Hollywood casino was. The range of what they deal with is just unbelievable. And then, to add more to it, we expect them to get in the middle of neighbor disputes about whether or not it's okay to have a particular business in a neighborhood or not. And then they're supposed to mediate those disputes to try to stop putting us in the middle of them. All while, I will keep in mind, we all sit up here and we say repeatedly over and over and over again that growing our tax base is the most important thing that we can do. We just said that. We just had that conversation with Chris and Tib just a minute ago, that we're supposed to be cleaning up the blight and growing our tax base. But we're only spending $800,000 on the department that reviews all residential and commercial development that occurs in our city. So just to give you all point of reference, because some people might think that don't have a point of reference, we have a $250 million budget. And if that isn't profound to you, I just happen to know that we spend $540,000 on mental health in Wyandotte County. And I think mental health is important to spend money on. But when you look at the percentage of people that are seeking mental health versus the millions of dollars of deals and the number one priority with the county, it is absolutely appalling and shocking to me that we fund this department at the $800,000 level. I don't know that I would want to come to work every day.
One of the things that I've done some analysis on is our caseload. And if our caseload is X, we proceed and we have about 80% of the projects approved per the schedule that we publish. Some of them have issues that have to be resolved, engineering issues or whatever, they get delayed for some reason. But I think that's a pretty good number. I would just, off the top of my head, say that would probably sound about right. But if the caseload goes to X plus 1, that number drops by 30 days. And so it takes everything longer. And I'm kind of working on a lot of statistics right now for the budget process to show those things. But it is increasingly difficult. And I've lost one staff member because the workload was too high, and of our economic situation for the last years, and he decided to go to a different city. Great employee, but he'd had enough. So I think that it's a good point that we're pretty efficient in how we operate this, and we've kept pace, but when we have periods like we've had this month, it's been difficult. But I'm sorry I didn't act surprised, but I very much appreciate your comments.
Sure. And I hope nobody else gets the wrong idea. We have other departments that I feel like are underfunded, but this just stuck out glaringly to me. I mean, and what I also have seen is that our budget doesn't necessarily fit our priorities, which I can't understand why we can't get our arms around that. We say we want one thing, but then budget rolls around and we end up spending more money on stuff that no one has brought up and less stuff on stuff that we've harped on repeatedly. So it's just very frustrating.
I will share with the commission that we just recently received approval to purchase something called Encode, and Rob will be probably
It's on
coming
the next
back.
slide.
Oh, okay. Rob, why don't you go to the next slide, because I think you'll find this interesting. So we are investing some of our dollars for our innovations into his area, so.
Good.
So another item on customer service is making greater utilization of electronic resources and capacity, because in the long run, it's cheaper than people. And so if we can do things electronically that we don't have to have a staff person for, then it's better for the government as a whole. One of these is called Encode 360, and basically the 1-minute version of this is that it says if you're a citizen in Wyandotte County and you want to open a bakery, you type "I want to open a bakery" into the text field, and it says you can have a bakery in these zoning districts. Here's a map of those zoning districts, and here are the for sale and for lease properties with contact information and building information about those properties that you might want to open that business in, and land bank properties, and we're going to work with the tie to Opportunity Space as part of this. We'll either direct them right into the Opportunity Space website or do something similar so that we're not duplicating Chris's work. But it also gives you all the zoning code criteria, and they're going to take the zoning code and they're going to put hyperlinks to all the definitions. It will have calculators for sign areas and landscaping and parking requirements. And so we think that it will help folks. It'll tell them if you need a special use permit for this or not, which is a huge deal right now with the way we just changed the used car ordinances. I have angry people about used cars multiple times every week. I think it's a great thing we're doing, but it's a surprise and to some folks now, and this type of website will help that. But we think that it will cut down on our call volume significantly to allow the planners to have more time to work on their reports, or to answer, instead of a general question that is a rabbit chase, which some of them are, will be a specific question about something that they've learned from Encode that we can actually help them identify a real answer to.
And the beautiful thing about this system is it actually integrates with our current municipal code online. So it's seamless in that aspect, and then it'll be pulling in all of our GIS data to layer into it, and it's got a really neat user interface. So once we get that up and running, we're going to come demo that to the commission, probably back here at this committee, but it's going to be a really nice tool, especially if, like Rob was saying, just on the sign issue that this business was having, they could have easily put in their stuff into the system and had it tell them what they couldn't do, and we're going to be using our new sign code to actually set this system up as we get that approved this year.
And so I should have the contracts this week on this for Doug to sign, and then it's a 60 to 90-day build process. So May-ish, we should have this up and running, and we'll be able to put links on the homepage, the UG homepage, on the planning homepage, economic development, anybody else's page that wants it, they can link to it to help folks figure out where they can build a new business and what properties are available.
Nice.
My suggestion, same suggestion I've had every time we've looked at measurable goals, is put something up there you can measure. So if average time to completion of the process is too long in our estimation, let's set a goal that we're going to decrease the average time to completion of the process by X amount of time. Then did we make it or not? Then what we're talking about, again, we're talking about means to an end as much as we're talking about the end. If we've been averaging X number of new businesses per year over the last 5 years, we set a goal that's going to be X plus 2, because our new system, that's what we want, is more businesses that are getting business licenses, that if they're the right kind of business are generating sales tax revenue. So we want to facilitate an increased number of businesses who get up and running faster. And so I would just encourage us to think about, if there's one step in this process that's taking a really long time right now, it's the black hole step of this process. Set a goal for improving that step of the process, then throw all your resources at it and come back and say, we made it, and our new resources helped us get there.
And I think that one of the hard things for me in this particular area is that the things that we measure right now, because we're still doing the measurable resources we started 8 years ago. We still do those every quarter. And when we look at, are we processing things on time, we're at 99% on time. I mean, we very rarely are behind on, getting a staff report out on time, getting engineering review back on time, and so we are knocking it out of the park on those things. Now, it's requiring a lot of overtime and a lot of extra hours, and when somebody's gone, then it really piles on. But those things are going really well, and to figure out how to measure. I mean, what you asked about, are they getting open faster? That's an amoeba to measure, because I don't know what their start point is, and I'll never know what their start point is on when they started and be able to track that. And so I guess if you have ideas on what part of that to track, because, when we went through and we did the whole tracking system before, we thought that the review times were the critical thing, and we really focused for years on review time. And my staff doesn't like me very much because I talk about review time so much. I don't necessarily care about that, but that's easy to measure. I can say we did, 80% of first reviews within 2 weeks, and we're really at, and we did 90% of second reviews within 1 week, and we're getting all of that done. But that when somebody has a business idea and how fast that gets open, I'm not sure how to track that. So I would love to be able to do that, but I'm not sure exactly how I would do that.
As far as I'm concerned, you figure out what needs to be measured. You're the professional in that area, but I see up here, implement ENCODE 360. My question to you would be, why? Why do you need that? What will it help you do better, faster, bigger? Why? It's going to cost some money to implement ENCODE 360. It has to be there. I'm guessing it's going to solve one or more problems.
Right.
Can you quantify those problems? And then you can come back and say, we implemented ENCODE 360 and we solved these problems. We improved these measurements. Whatever it is, and I don't know any better than you. You're the professional in this area, but I see a strategy up there that's not necessarily tied to some sort of end game.
Okay, and
So
I
that's
think
my
that-
only observation.
I think that part of the ENCODE is more of it's a little bit of public relations, that this is available and it's on the internet, and it puts a better public face out than we have now on the website, which is somewhat difficult to measure. And so that was one of the strategies that I had. One of them is of the purely answering questions. How many phone calls do we get? How many inquiries do we get? And so I'll work on making a goal for next year, once this is up and running, about measuring what we got out of it compared to what we were getting before. I think that's a great idea. And part of it is just promotion of, hey, it's easy to do business here. We make it easy. We put it all online. In my big dream, our whole development process, except for a pre-application meeting, which we could probably do on Skype, would be fully online. You could find out where you want to build your bakery. You could find out how to talk to George about economic development incentives. You could find out how to do the planning process, and you'd be able to make all those applications online. If you needed to meet with us and you were in New Zealand, then we could do that by Skype, and you could have your architect submit all their plans and fees and everything online. We'd go through the whole process until they had to come to a public meeting, and it would all be online, and we would be able to facilitate that, and that's much more efficient. We're all paperless now, so for instance, the casino would have saved like $26,000 in paper printing costs if we had been electronic then, so we're saving folks big money that way. So we're really trying to focus on making it easier on the private side to do business with us on the electronic side, and that's part of this. And once again, I'll think about how I would better measure that.
So just a final comment for me, a question about this. Rob, do you view this as more helpful to the big business like casino, Village West area, or do you view it as helpful to the mom and pop that want to put a bakery in off Central Avenue?
I think it'll probably help both equally, and maybe more so the mom and pops, because they don't have to be able to talk to me during business hours. They can sit at home and do this, and all of our contact information is there, and they can send us an email, and they can do it when they're not necessarily having to be at work and taking care of customers. And so from that perspective, it might be more helpful to them, but I think it'll help everyone.
Yeah, so I think this is great. I mean, it's you have to just try stuff. And when there's only a handful of you and you have no money, I'll just keep harping on that. And, I mean, you have to do stuff, and so you're trying to be creative and innovative in ways to address the needs of our constituents. My concern would only be, and this is not belittling at all, I think this is great. I would just tell you that what I've learned over the years, that planning and zoning is very complicated. It's like law. It's like a form of law. Because you're governed by statutes. You know, a lot of the delay in moving things forward is governed by statute. You need 30-day notices, which is all the law telling you have to do that. It's not Rob saying, I don't like you, you have to wait 30 days. Now, I'm the biggest complainer about that. It's nothing personal.
I know.
It's just, I don't like it. I think it slows it down. So, but I would tell you that, that my concern is that it's such a complicated system. I mean, even just to get a permit for chickens is very complicated. I've personally filled out the paperwork. You have to go to a hearing. You have to keep track of the date. You have to pay a fee. You know, if you're not at all, maybe you don't speak the language or you're not accustomed to living in a city, I could see how it could be very cumbersome, and computers are still overwhelming for some of our people that live in our community. So hats off to you for trying. I will, again, during budget time, try to say if we really want to grow our community, we need to grow our economic development department as well as our planning and zoning department.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
No further items. The Neighborhood and Community Development Standing Committee is adjourned.
Let's-
Thanks, Rob.
Shall we move right into economic development and finance? Mr. Alvey called me and said that he will not be able to be here today, so we want to welcome everyone to this meeting of the Economic Development and Finance Standing Committee. Public comment is welcome. Anyone who wishes to speak on any item on the Standing Committee agenda may do so when that item is up for discussion. You'll be recognized by myself or another member of the committee. You come to the microphone and the podium in the center of the room. You'll have 5 minutes to make your comments. For accurate recording and broadcast purposes, we do ask that everyone present please speak as directly as possible into a microphone. And I'm going to wait for just a second before I have you call the roll. Is that right? All right, would you please call the roll?
Roll call. Alvey. Walters. Murgia.
Here.
Townsend.
Here.
Walker.
Here.
McKiernan.
Here. Our first item of business on the agenda tonight is approval of our minutes from our meeting of December 7th, 2015.
Move to approve.
Second.
It's been a motion and a second to approve the minutes as submitted. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no. The ayes have it. Those are approved as submitted. Our first item is measurable goals. Item number 1 under measurable goals is Purchasing and Compliance Division. Mr. Laughlin,
Tonight
No.
we have Sharon Reed here
All
from
right.
Purchasing and Compliance, and she's making a transition from reporting directly to me to Mr. Laughlin, so.
okay. Great to have you here, ma'am.
Good evening to everyone. Procurement and contract compliance from last year. One of our goals was to implement a survey for our department. And actually, we tried to set that up. We were successful internally and externally, but we had a hard time marketing it. I think we received a total of 5 internal and probably about 10 external, and then it went flat. So part of this is to show you how we're going to move forward. So our goals, our departmental goals for 2016. Accountability, for us to take ownership and to preserve the public trust. Impartiality, unbiased decision-making and actions, and to ensure fairness to the public good. Ethics, doing the right thing, and so we can deserve the public's trust. Professionalism, upholding the highest technical and ethical standards, and to balance the public interest. Service, obligations to assist our stakeholders and to the value of support for the public good. Transparency, to have easy accessibility, understanding, and to be responsible for public funds. Our customer service. Kind of going to get on the bandwagon with the clerk's office, and so DOTS is going to host our surveys. We're going to survey for our internal and external customers, and we're going to review the data so we can determine our process improvements. And this is just a sample of our survey that we are putting together as we move forward. So what are we looking for? To know what areas we need to improve. Understand and listen to the needs and wants of our internal and our external customers. And to formalize a plan of action. How do we do that? We recently implemented in August of 2015 our new e-procurement site. So this is our dashboard. And this dashboard automatically, when a supplier goes in there to register, we can get the number of the suppliers. Let me go back. We get the number of our MBWBEs and then our number of local suppliers. So as of August of last year, this is the total number that we have to date. How do we intend to increase our vendor database, more visibility in our community? Vendor fairs, partnership with BPU on how we can do business. Last year, in 2014, we partnered with BPU and we put on a Let's Talk initiative where we had local vendors, where we invited them in to showcase their services, and it went very well. We also partnered with business license and with our accounting department to kind of show them how the business process works. And participate in the promotion of the minority and women business owned, and how to do business with the unified government. This is our expenditures for 2015. Shows the number of purchase requisitions that we did for 2015, our number of SPUDs, and our visa statements, also equated with the dollar figures that we produced.
Any questions, discussion?
I guess what we were doing last year was kind of setting a baseline for ourselves, and then what they're going to be working on this year is looking at more detail on sort of where we can do better based on the data that we're getting on the surveys particularly. And now they have a baseline data for at least 5 months, I guess 4 months, of how our suppliers and the types of things that are moving through our e-procurement website. So then we'll want to start establishing some matrix once we kind of have an idea of where we're trying to head as far as the customer service component is concerned. So this was all done before we had a lot of that data rolling in. But that's the direction we'll be heading with this. Sharon and I have been talking about, and Tib will be picking up in that area.
So I would just say, I know we asked everybody a lot of questions and now no one's asking you anything. I'll just tell you from my perspective, as a commissioner, we don't get a lot of constituents complaining about the procurement process. At least I don't, you know. And I didn't even really understand procurement until the last couple of years and how it works. So I know you're new, so I just didn't want you to feel bad that we we didn't care.
No.
Because I do care, and I'm glad that you're working to make it better, but it's not a piece that I think politicians really have much direct contact with, unless you guys do.
I was going to say the same thing, that I don't recall in a little over 2 years a single complaint about procurement. I think there's a general feeling that, are we doing a good enough job in minority defined recruitment, if maybe that's not the right word, but involvement in our procurement process. I know numbers are misleading. I was surprised there were 330 minority businesses listed, or local businesses listed. I guess it's a matter of who you would ask. I suppose there are people that either have not been able to participate or don't know how to participate, but aside from encouraging the continued vigilance with local and particularly our local minority community that wants to participate, I suppose when we have nothing to say, that's a good thing.
That's a good thing.
Because we're certainly quick about it when we have something bad to say.
Well, I think internally for us, on the customer service side with our internal customers is, working to be there to be supportive when they're trying to get something out to bid. Our time to be able to assist them on that, to have standard supply type contracts in place. There's a lot that Sharon and her staff do. And then, of course, our legal department works with them on every contract they put out, and our departments are working on those too. So the efficiency and effectiveness of that, if it's being done right, keeps everything moving much more quickly on projects. It also keeps us out of court if those things are done correctly too. So I think there's a lot to be said about what we're going to learn from some of these surveys. And I know that Sharon knows there's a lot of new trends out there in the purchasing world that we'd like to look at and how those might help save us money and be able to deliver services more effectively. So,
Commissioner Walker.
Yeah, I suppose since we're just talking and it's easy for us to give out ideas and more work for you and staff to do, I have to be honest, I probably haven't had a comprehensive review of the procurement code since I was employed here. Occasionally there's an item on an agenda that does something, but I certainly would not feel opposed to the idea that as time goes on over the next year or two that we take a comprehensive look at the procurement code and see if there are efficiencies. I mean, when it first was developed, it was part of this new government, and the staff and the commission were striving for a level playing board. Everybody, no special consideration. Anybody who competed, and I always thought the procurement code was a little bit complicated for the small business person to, it's yay thick. And so, they hand you a procurement code or you go to the code online now, and it's a little bit daunting to read it all. And I know probably your people help, but I would certainly suggest that perhaps we look at new trends in governmental purchasing and see what things we can do to make it not necessarily easier for a particular group or person, but just easier for everybody to, come in and participate. The better participation, theoretically, the better the price we're going to get and the better the service. So I also thought, why not require, if you're going to put in a bid, you put in a survey. I suppose the problem with that is everybody be afraid to give an honest survey for fear that they wouldn't get their bid then if they put in a bad survey. But yeah, it would be a hard market to crack to get people to bother to fill out a survey, because if you do it before, if you do it after, well, you're going to have people who are not happy because they didn't get the bid, so you may not get an honest one. So I don't know how you're going to find your market to get a statistically significant report. That's all. Thanks.
Commissioner Townsend.
Thank you. Good evening, Ms. Reed. Just a few questions, just so I'm clear and maybe others watching will better understand. When you're talking about who your internal and your external customers are, who's in those respective groups?
The internal or the stakeholders within the unified government, the externals or the constituents outside.
Okay, and the
Who we serve.
stakeholders being what? Different departments within the
Different
Eugene?
departments and the people that we interact with on a daily basis.
Okay. You talked about actively promoting women and minority-owned businesses with the unified government through a variety of means and methods. if you would just share me, what are the means and methods that are being used currently, and what is the department looking at in expanding those methods, or how?
Well, currently, every solicitation that goes out, we require that we do a local minority women-owned business within those solicitations, even in the RFP process. I think where we've lacked is that we don't engage the minority women-owned businesses to come in to see how we do business. So we're going to take a look and see how we can corner that market. And one thing that I did say is that we partnered with BPU in 2014 to do a Let's Talk initiative where we let the locals come in and where they had an opportunity to showcase their goods and services. But we also had a forum to where we educated them on how to do business and how to go through the business license process and what it was going to take to the vendor number and how that process worked. And that was very enlightening for them. So we're going to do another one and include the minority and women-owned businesses for 2016. And I think that that would be an opportunity for them to showcase their goods and services and give them the education piece on how we do business and partnering for not only us, the UG, but for BPU as well.
Okay. Well, let me ask another question. If a contract is going to be, if there's a solicitation, a request for proposal that's out, what methods or means are used currently to engage and make minority and women-owned businesses aware of those requests for proposals or contracts that are being let?
Well, currently out on our procurement site, we do have a where they can access what contracts are out there for 2014 or 2015. But we also have our database where it's set up to where we can do a search based on the commodity codes that they represent, to where we can target those minority and business-owned businesses specifically. And so electronically, we can pull them in and we email those notices to them. And if they're not, for some reason, if they have not been active, we follow up with them to find out, is there a reason why you haven't participated in the bid process for a while? And sometimes it's just because the person is no longer there and that email address is no longer valid. So we're trying to communicate with them to find out how best we can meet their needs.
Okay. What about the woman or minority-owned business that we have not done business with yet, that's out there that may want to reply to an RFP? How would they be made aware of the contract that's out for let or the RFP? Let's say they're not one of these, what was the number, 308 minority businesses that are already, I guess, it was 638, thank you. What if you're the 700th women or minority-owned business? How would those entities be made aware of what's available? Do we actually, through the newspapers or anything else, try to make them aware?
We advertise through the Echo, but sometimes we're in communication with some of the other city entities that maybe they've used the service for, and we'll contact them and say, hey, do you have a minority vendor that can provide this service? And they give us that information, and therefore we can contact them directly to let them know, hey, this opportunity is coming available. Can you register in our database for them to have access to what's coming out?
Okay. You said other cities. What geographic area are we talking about here beyond KCK?
Olathe, Johnson County, Kansas City, Missouri. We have access, and we network in that process.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other discussion, questions? Thank you very much, ma'am.
Thank you.
Appreciate the presentation. That takes us to our first item on the committee agenda, and that is our quarterly investment and budget revisions report. I believe Mr. Levin will present that. Oh, I was wrong. It's the team.
Commissioners, As I've previously stated, this is simply our quarterly investment and budget revision report. It is through the fourth quarter of 2015. No action is taken or is required by the commission. I'll review the summary table on investments by type. It should be in your packet. Some of the key numbers on the table. At the end of the fourth quarter, we had over $221 million in investments. Fourth quarter, the figure is generally higher because it reflects the first half property tax collections that are not yet distributed. They were distributed in January. Our average investments, though, year to date were at approximately $165 million. Our interest earnings for the year were $586,000, or a little bit over that. That was slightly above last year, and so really we had been in a period of declining interest earnings, so that was positive. Our overall yield on our current portfolio was still a little bit under 1% at 0.86%.
Mr. Levin, I have a question. The report says interest posted through
Yeah.
September 30, but that should be
that-
December 31st?
Yes, that was,
Okay.
and I noticed that correction today.
Yeah, I have a question.
Sure.
It's really more of a issue I take with the way we do our business. I'm looking at down the list of investments, and candidly, there's not one bank that is headquartered in Wyandotte County that has any of our investments. We have at least two and possibly three. I don't really know how to classify Security because it is also owned by a holding company, but Security Bank Corporation is headquartered here. Community First is headquartered here in Brotherhood Bank. And I'm inclined to believe that a few hundredths of an interest point, call it a local there's nothing you can do about it. Your report's fine. Your thoughts would be important because I know you're going to be leaving. But I also believe that helping our local businesses succeed and stay here is also important. Commerce Bank does no significant contribution to this community that I know of. Perhaps I'm wrong, and somebody here can correct me. Most of these investors are Missouri-owned banks or Missouri-owned holding companies. They're not even Kansas banks. Even UMB Kansas is owned by a holding company, I believe, that is in Missouri.
Yes.
And I don't like doing business with, first of all, Missouri banks, and second of all, no banks whatsoever that are headquartered here and pay taxes here, and and I'm gonna be on this issue throughout the rest of this year. Your thoughts on that?
Well, we adhere to our investment policy that's reviewed annually by the governing body. That policy currently states that we do offer the opportunity for our investment of vital funds to local banks. And local banks, as defined in the policy, are if they have a physical presence in the county. And so you mentioned specifically Commerce Bank. I believe they have 2 locations within Wyandotte County.
Yes,
and
that's true, but it is a Missouri-owned bank.
We certainly, later in the year, when we review our investment policy, if we want to have something, I guess we'd have to define what constitutes a local bank other than a physical preference. And if we wanted to say if the bid is within a certain number of basis points, we would go with that bid first. I think that might be one option. What we do have in the policy, and it's something we can expand upon, is that once a year we offer all banks in the county the opportunity to invest up to $95,000 on idle funds. And you see two of the investments there, Bank of Labor, which is Brotherhood Bank, and Liberty Bank chose to participate in that. And so that's an automatic amount. We could increase that amount to $250,000, which would be insured by FDIC. And I mean, that might be a way to go to at least expand that.
Well, it's just my thinking on it, that local banks should have some locally, well, I say locally owned. I mean, I don't know who the actual owners of any banks are, but headquartered ones in Wyandotte County, and then secondarily in Kansas, it sounds provincial, but we should be taking care of our own.
Yeah.
If they want to be taken care of. Now, maybe these amounts of money are not, I realize a bank has to have a certain amount of reserves when they take money.
Yeah, it's the
And they may not want to bid on it, but they should have the opportunity that, they should have the opportunity to say no first.
Well, they all have the opportunity to bid on idle funds. There are collateral requirements, and those collateral requirements are in our investment policy as well as established by by state statute. And so
Okay.
that's another consideration. I would say probably Security Bank would be, I believe you might consider them as a local bank, and they have chosen not to bid on our investments. We do a lot of business with them related to our trustee relationships with them, and we view them as an important partner in the community.
All right, well, thank you. It really didn't have much to do with it.
Yeah, the only other thing I was going to add on our investment policy, I think the expectation in December of 2015, the Federal Reserve raised that short-term interest rate to 0.25%, and what we'll see from that is more opportunities in short-term investment of funds, and the expectation is we should be able to at least increase our interest earnings in 2016.
Commissioner Murguia?
Yeah, so it sounds like you're following the policy, Lou, and I hear that, and that's great. But what I hear Commissioner Walker saying is he just wants to ensure that local banks here are aware of the opportunity, and it's sort of being our job to make them aware, especially these local banks that go out of their way to reinvest in our community right here in Wyandotte County. I think that's very important also. So if you think they know and they just lack the capacity or interest to take on these kinds of financing, then fine. Then that's their choice. But if you think there's something that we could do, maybe a change in our policy that would entice them to get more involved, that'd be great also. So I think that's all I heard you really saying.
Yeah, really.
Yeah. I'll make note, and I'll
As you're leaving us.
I'll share that. The other item in the report is the budget revisions, over 10,000 in the fourth quarter. There were a significant number of them, and I'll turn that over to Mr. Lindsay.
During the fourth quarter of 2015, we had 21 transactions of budget revisions. We had 6 come from contingencies. The rest came from within the departments themselves. 2 of them came in front of commission. Are there any questions about any of them?
It looks like no. Thank you.
Thank you.
And that's the end of item number 1?
Yes.
Takes us to item number 2, which is
refunding.
There we go. Technology's great when it works. So it's an ordinance authorizing the issuance of refunding bonds for 39 Rainbow South.
I'll introduce who just joined me. This is Phil Richter. He's Senior Vice President and Manager of Public Finance with United Missouri Bank, UMB. And he might have...
One of those Missouri
You're a
banks.
lucky night, sir, you're a lucky night.
He's participating in this endeavor, and he might have additional comments related to our previous discussion. But before I turn it over to Phil for some comments, I just want to give you some background on what we're bringing before you this evening. You certainly are well aware of the project that we're referencing is 39th and Rainbow South. That was the first phase development of 39th and Rainbow. The major part of that project is a combination of the Holiday Inn hotel development plus about 4 to 6 retail establishments. The project's been very successful. The government participated in the backing of an initial temporary note on that project. The developer took out that temporary note 2 years ago, and our expectation was that when we had the ability to refinance that project with the opportunity to go to a lower interest rate, the current interest rate with that is 5%, and we've worked with Phil and UMB, and they've brought forth a proposal that would allow for a refunding to go forward. The specific parameters, and they're listed on the document that you have in front of you, is that the principal is not to exceed $4.3 million. There's two series to the financing. There's a fixed rate component and a variable rate component. The fixed rate interest rate not to exceed 4.25%, and the variable rate not to exceed 3.75%. We've worked with Phil to structure the variable rate so to minimize the risk of a variable rate. The variable rate would not occur. Phil is at 5 years into it, 7 years, and so it's just a 10-year financing with the variable rate not to occur until year 7, and we've put a limitation on the increase at that time. UMB is doing a private placement on the deal with the placement fee of cannot exceed 1.5%. I think just as an overall summary, what this refinancing does, it allows for a considerable reduction in the interest rate. Currently, these bonds are, the schedule is for final payoff in 2031. Based on the current revenue flow and the reduction in interest rate, we believe we can, where they're currently tracking, they'll be paid off 3 years early, and what that means, once they're paid off, we end the TIF and the revenues fully flow back to the government. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Phil for additional comments.
Thank you, Lou. Good evening, Commissioners. Thank you for letting me speak tonight. Essentially, the interest rate was about 5%, as Lou mentioned, and currently the market that we anticipate having this completed at would be at a rate of about 3.6. So we would save almost 1.5% in terms of interest. And of course, that interest then goes to pay off the debt that much faster, and which means that it's that much quicker that the county and the city is able to realize the tax revenues, and so that's of course the goal here. So essentially, the financing we would be issuing a new bond that would be backed by the TIF revenues. and at the lower interest rate. And as a result, we'd be able to pay off the higher interest rate, the 5% bond, and as we say, get that paid off that much faster. So that's essentially the transaction. It would not be a public sale, so it would be a private placement, which I think lowers the cost of doing the financing as well as keeps the transaction in institutional hands as opposed to being able to sold publicly.
Yeah, I guess one of the key points on that is there's no government backing. The pledge, the backing on these bonds are strictly the project revenues.
Any questions, discussion about this item? The request for action is to approve the ordinance, subject to all the parameters that were listed.
So move.
Second.
There's been a motion and a second to approve the ordinance as submitted. Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Roll call. Murgia.
Aye.
Townsend.
Aye.
McKiernan.
Aye.
Walker.
Aye.
Very much appreciate that. That has passed. Takes us to item number 3 on the committee agenda. And just for staff, this item doesn't appear to have a request for action facing page once you get into the body of the agenda itself.
Approve
So-
resolution.
Yeah.
Well, for those of us who get the electronic version and download it off Suite 1, we don't have an RFA facing page, which evidently did get printed for the paper edition. So as long as we can make sure that there's electronic facing pages, that would be great. This is a resolution to authorize the sale of GEO refunding bonds.
Thank you, Commissioner. And we do have the RFA page. I think we can get that to you. As I said, this is an resolution is authorizing the sale of general obligation refunding bonds Series 2016B and taxable Series 2016C. This is a refunding of our 2008 series. In 2008, we had 4 series issued, 2 tax exempt and 2 taxable. We are looking to do a refinancing and combine those into 2 issues, 1 taxable and 1 tax exempt. We believe that due to the current interest rate environment, we do have an opportunity to achieve some savings on the interest cost with a more favorable interest rate. Also included in your packet was a feasibility analysis that was done by Springstead, our financial advisor. And with that analysis, we believe that the refunding would result in an approximate savings of $2.7 million over the remaining term of the bond. And I would just like to say the remaining term is the same as the original term on the 2008 bond. We're not extending the term. It's the same term. Did also want to, I'm just going to refer to the table that is in that feasibility analysis. They did do a summary of all 4 issues. It is listed as an advanced crossover refunding, and I just wanted to point out what an advanced refunding is when you refund an issue more than 90 days before the call date. So if it's within 90 days, then it's called a current refunding. So that's why it's listed as an advance. The table also does give the future net savings over the life of the bond per issue, and it also gives us a present value savings percentage. And the reason I wanted to note that, in our debt policy that was approved by the Commission several years ago, we did state a target of wanting to obtain at least a 3% present value savings when we look at refundings. For each of these issues, the percentage ranges anywhere between 5.7% and 12%, with an average over all 4 issues at 9%. So due to the fact that this is above our target, we do view this as a favorable transaction. My last point, we are asking that this item be fast-tracked to this Thursday's Commission meeting. The reason for that is that the sale is set to occur on February 25th. That would be the morning prior to our next Commission meeting. So in order to get this approved, we needed to get this before the Commission this Thursday. And with that, I'll stand for any questions.
questions or discussion about this item?
Move approval.
Second.
So there's been a motion and a second to approve and fast track to the February 4th commission meeting. Any further discussion? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Roll call, Mergia,
Aye.
Townsend,
Aye.
Walker,
Aye.
McKiernan.
Aye. Thank you very much. That brings us to item number 4, which is a resolution authorizing payment to Bonner Springs for sales tax. George Brakovich.
Thank you. Thank you, Commissioners. George Brakovich with Economic Development. I'd like to recognize Marcia Harrington, Director of Economic Development for Bonner Springs. I'm sure you all recall that we did amended project plans for the Vacation Village Star District, which included the development of an auto mall. And part of the interest in the auto mall came from 2 dealerships that were already in Wyandotte County, the Dodge dealership on State Avenue and the Ford dealership in Bonner Springs. There was a real threat that both of those dealerships would leave the county because there weren't a lot of viable options for them to expand until the auto mall development came. As part of that compromise, though, with agreeing to move those into the auto mall was to establish base sales values and use those base sales values to have those revenues still flow to the local community. As we were establishing all of that, there was a commitment made from a staff level to Bonner Springs to ensure that if the dealership got relocated from Bonner Springs, there would be a continued revenue flow from the sales that were currently generated at that site for some period of time. And so the document that you have before you tonight, the resolution, is an attempt to memorialize that agreement. So it's a defined amount, and it's for a 5-year term. And the 5-year term is a staff recommendation. We feel that's an adequate amount of time for Bonner Springs to redevelop that particular site. It's still a shadow type development from the Walmart that exists in their community. And so what we're asking for you to consider tonight, and all of this has been vetted with Bonner Springs staff, and I don't speak for Marcia, but I think they've given us reason to believe they're okay with the deal as it's presented. So we're asking you to consider that. Again, it is a fixed amount, 5-year term. However, it also includes this year because we think that at some point in this year, probably in the fall, that dealership will actually relocate. And so the agreement contemplates that if the amount of sales that have been directed to Bonner Springs from the sales that are still occurring at that site, if they're not sufficient to meet that number, will allow enough revenue to flow back to make them whole on that number. So it's really a 5-year term plus current year. And
Any questions or discussion? So the request for action is to authorize to approve the resolution, authorizing these payments.
Move to approve.
Second?
There's a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Roll call, Mergia,
Aye.
Townsend,
Aye.
Walker,
Aye.
McKiernan.
Aye. Thank you so much. Ms. Harrington, thank you very much. Brings us to our 5th and final item, which is a request to authorize a resolution for the unified government to accept a grant.
Good evening, Commissioners. The Unified Government received a $150,000 grant from the Healthcare Foundation of Greater Kansas City. You have before you a resolution that would authorize Unified Government to enter into this grant award agreement, which is required by the foundation, and it sets out the obligations of the Unified Government. I believe the funds are going to be used for project management services for the Healthy Campus.
So there's no local match required.
No, Commissioner.
And we simply need to authorize the UG to accept the money and then direct it for that purpose.
That's correct.
Okay.
What is the purpose?
I was just going to say, what Healthy Campus?
Well,
I believe it's the project manager who actually came and spoke with us last week.
This is to pay Mr. Crandall?
yes, Commissioner.
The Healthcare Foundation is paying grant money to pay a developer to work on the development of the Healthy Campus?
That's my understanding. My understanding is that they had approached the unified government with some funds, and these funds became available. This was an idea to help.
Is this the state healthcare foundation? Sorry, Hal, I'm sorry, do you have questions?
No, go right ahead.
Okay, so, is this the state healthcare foundation, or is this the Greater Kansas City Healthcare Foundation?
It's the Greater Kansas City.
They're gonna pay for a developer to develop a healthy campus?
Yes, that they brought funds to the unified government. This proposal was given to them is to utilize these funds to get the developer to start working on it to see if it could become viable, and they did authorize a grant for that.
Wow. Okay.
Any other questions or discussion? The request for action then is to authorize the unified government to receive said grant funds.
That's
I'll
correct.
move to approve that the unified government accept said grant funds. Commissioner Townsend?
I'll second it, and I just did have a question on some of the supporting documents.
Yes.
That's all I was asking for clarification. Good evening. There's an attachment B as I look back through this. I too was under the impression, as I read this, that some of these funds in whole or part would go toward the remuneration of the gentleman, the company that made the presentation Thursday does, the update on that. On the attachment B, I'm just curious where they do the pre-development services, item B under 1. It talks about compensation for a phase of services. There's a monthly retainer of $9,475 per month, July 1, 2015 through June 30th of 2016. Then July 1st of 2016, that amount would increase to $16,000 and some change. Do you have any idea why the cost of the retainer in 2016?
My
The increase.
I believe I do. My understanding is it's hoped that the work in the beginning was, phased. It would start out more as the development part, and then it would increase, and that more work would be coming in as different items came on board and would require more of CBC's time at that point.
Does this contract have a fail-safe provision if this healthy campus doesn't go forward later this year? Are we still obligated? Are these funds obligated? Do we have a repayment obligation to the Healthcare Foundation?
No, there's no repayment obligation. I mean, now, I'm assuming if we terminated it and didn't use the funds, and had them still left over, that we'd need to return them.
Yeah.
But no, we're not, there's no repayment if the campus doesn't proceed.
Yes,
Do you
ma'am.
happen to have the details of what this exactly is supposed to pay for? I write grants to the Healthcare Foundation. Their grants are very detailed. What is this money supposed to pay for specifically? To rally community residents around this healthy campus initiative? Is it, what exactly is it?
Commissioner, do you want me to speak
Lindsay,
about?
come on up, please, yes.
Sure. Commissioners, I'm not Jason Banks, but sometimes people get us confused, so. I submitted this proposal to the Healthcare Foundation of Greater Kansas City in November of 2014, specifically to fund a project manager for the Healthy Campus. So we had already drafted a potential job description that we would send to RFP if we were able to find funding for that project management position. And so we had that job description drafted. We submitted that as a proposal to the Healthcare Foundation of Greater Kansas City in November of 2014. So specifically to
you're just getting
pay.
the money now?
We are. We were notified of the award in January of 2015.
My understanding is that the pool of funding is within their special initiatives pool, so it's a little bit outside their normal grant process, but it went to their board between November and January, late January. They came back and notified us that we were awarded the grant, but it did take a while to get through some of the paperwork between then and now.
Under what category did you receive this funding?
Special initiative funding was what they called it.
That's why it had to go to the board.
It did go to the board, yeah.
Yeah. Is there a particular grant person over there that you worked with?
We are working with Andreas Dominguez. He's our program officer.
Any other questions or discussion of the proposal? There's been a motion and a second to authorize receipt of the grant funds. Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Roll call, Murguia.
Aye.
Townsend.
Aye.
Walker.
Aye.
McKiernan.
Aye. Thank you very much for the information. That brings us to the end of our... Yes,
For the
ma'am.
record,
Sure.
Ms. Bingham, I'm going to want a bit more information at the regular commission meeting. I'm sure I'm not the only one, as to how these numbers were reached to pay $9,016. I'm real unclear about this. It's great. I'm glad we don't have a match, and I'm certainly glad to hear that we don't have any obligation in the event we do not move forward on the healthy campus. But I'd like to see some of this. I'd like to see this grant in writing.
Sure.
And a contract that they have. I don't think it was in this thing. It was just the RFA. So before this will come up on when? Is this fast track?
No.
So
this won't come up until the 26th?
That's correct.
So there's plenty of time to get the documentation out.
Sure.
Okay.
And I'll say too that when we were notified of the grant award, when we wrote the proposal, this was before the commission changed their policy to have grant funding over, I think it's $50,000 come before the commission. So the process changed between the time when we submitted the original proposal and today, which is why you didn't see it on the front end.
Well, that was a question I had. I'm glad you answered that.
Sure.
So you applied for this in 14 and you just got notified in the beginning of this year?
Right. We applied November 2014. We were notified in January of 2015. So it was just a couple of
So it's been a whole year
months.
since you were notified you got the grant?
A little over a year.
And,
About a year.
and it's taken a year to get it to us?
Yes.
Why so long?
I'm not sure, and we may, I think Andreas would be happy to come to the full commission meeting if we'd like to have him there. Because it was outside of their normal grant process, I think my understanding was that they weren't on a timeline, and so they weren't rushing it on their end. We sent in all the paperwork they needed from us, and then we didn't touch base for a while, and then came back together in the summer to start working on the legal agreement. But I know Andreas was out for a little bit in the fall and came back. I just don't think it was, because it was outside of their normal grant process, they weren't on the same deadline.
So could you invite Andreas to the meeting?
Sure.
To answer questions? That'd be great.
I'd be happy to.
Okay.
Fantastic. That is our last item of business. We are adjourned. Thank you.